Thank you, everyone. Hi, I am Shweta. I am going to be your MC for the closing events, and I'm one of the MERC conveners for 2021. Today, we have the feature panel and the closing speech. Before I begin, I just want to express our gratitude and say that this has been an absolute honor for the MERC leadership team for 2021 to host this event. Thanks again to Monash University, Monash Education, and Monash Graduate Association for sponsoring this event. Just a reminder that the closing events are going to be recorded and it will be made available online at the MERC Conference website after the conclusion of the conference. But first, an acknowledgement of the country. I pay my respect to the people of the Kulin nations on whose traditional estates I speak on today, to their ancestors and to the children who are educating into the future. I also acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present. The theme for this year's MERC conference is embracing adaptability and transformation in research. The feature panel for today is all about the adaptive and transformative nature of a Monash Education PhD. So who better to be on our panel than a past Monash Education PhD students, and who better to chair such a panel than our very own Dean of Education, Professor Viv Ellis. The distinguished panel members include, and please help me welcome them, Dr. Katrina MacDonald, Dr. Luke Macaulay, Dr. Haoran Zheng, Mariko Francis, Dr. Utami, and Dr. Tanya Stephenson. I shall now hand over to Professor Ellis to begin the feature panel discussion, which will conclude at 4:45. Over to you, Professor Ellis.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me. I should also acknowledge the lands on which I'm speaking to you today, which are of the Yaluk clan, the Boonwurrung people, communities of the Kulin Nation. I'm here in South Melbourne. I acknowledge the land never ceded, and I pay my respects to the owners and the custodians of the land, and pay my respects particularly to their elders past, present, and future. So this is a great honor and a great pleasure, particularly to talk to former PhD students or current and former PhD students and find out more about them and their experience, both within the faculty and beyond. And I don't think I've ever met any of the other speakers, but I have seen some of them on Twitter in the kind of modern way. So I recognize some people looking similar to their kind of Twitter profiles, but it might be a really nice idea if we go round at the beginning, and maybe I go to each panelist, maybe start with Katrina, just to tell us a little bit, very briefly, about when you did your PhD and what you did your PhD in, what kind of experience you had in the faculty. So Katrina, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Viv. Yes, I'm joining you from the lands of the Bunurong of the Kulin Nations, and I acknowledge and honour elders past and present. I finished my PhD in 2019 and my research is in educational leadership and social justice. So my research was looking at principals working in highly disadvantaged schools, and I looked at their life histories and how they understood social justice, and then how they practice social justice for those communities. And I'm currently a postdoctoral research fellow at Deakin University's Strategic Research Centre in Education.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Who have I got on my list here? Luke.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Viv. So my name is Luke Macaulay. I finished my PhD at Monash in the Faculty of Education early to mid last year. My research was with youth from refugee backgrounds, particularly with young people from Sudan and South Sudan. And I was exploring their experiences regarding the transition to adulthood in Melbourne. some of the challenges that they faced, some of their cultural perspectives on what it means to be an adult, and also their experiences of political belonging within Australia. And like Katrina, I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Deakin University, although in a different centre. I'm in the Centre for Refugee Employment Advocacy Training and Education.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Luke. Haoran, Zheng, are you there? And would
Yes,
you like to go next?
Yes, definitely. Hi, everyone. Hi, Viv. My name is Haoran, and I did my PhD from 2016, and I finished my PhD last year in May 2020. My PhD looked at initial early childhood teacher education. My research explored international pre-service teachers' professional experience in Australian early childhood education. I engaged with Bourdieu's critical thinking tools and to look at their experiences, such as their challenges and also opportunities and funds of knowledge that they can contribute to the Australian early childhood context. Currently, I work as a lecturer and also a research fellow in the Department of Education at Swinburne University of Technology.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And the next person on my list is Eridwi. Oh, I think it's the famous phrase, you might be on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Viv. And actually, we met before in the Peninsula Playlab Lounge. Yeah, and so, but now I'm back to Indonesia. I started my PhD 2017 on February, and then I graduated on April 2021, and entitled Children's Learning and Development in Early Childhood Education Setting in Indonesia. I developed a playwork approach in Indonesian context, and this is kind of like a cultural historical study, investigate play-based learning and play practices for children development in Indonesian context.
That's great. Thank you very much. Good to see you again. You must have left shortly after I met you at Peninsula.
True.
Yeah, brilliant. Next on the list is Mariko Francis. Mariko, you've got PhD candidate after your name.
Still, I have just submitted. I had received my examination results only about a few weeks ago, and I'm just working through some of the minor revisions before I resubmit to hopefully be conferred. I started my PhD in 2016, and I think I got quite badly hit by COVID and a few other things that happen in terms of life events. So my research focused on supplementary education, looking at why parents supplemented their children's education outside of the school system, and more so to do with cram schools and supplementary rather than private tuition. I did an Australia-wide quantitative study on Australian parents. And yes, I looked more at the neoliberal and the critical, I guess, analysis of their motivations and their influences from a systems perspective.
That's great. And so you're on your way. You're kind of in the difficult bit of finalising now. Do you know what you're going to? Do you know that yet?
I have been working a little bit with my supervisor doing some research assistant work. No, not quite yet. I have been looking at different roles, but I'm still wading my way through the different opportunities that are available out there, as well as taking stock as to what's important now going forward.
Yeah, and maybe we'll come back to the other speakers in a minute and ask them about how they dealt with the phase you're in at the moment, where there is a range of opportunities available to you. So thank you very much, Mariko. Tanya, I do recognize we've met at Peninsula too.
We have, that's right. So I did my PhD as part of the Conceptual Play Lab at the Peninsula campus. So we did meet at the launch a few months ago. And so I work closely with Ami here. So I just finished my PhD. It was just conferred just over a month ago. So fairly new. Yeah. But my focus was on the conceptual play world model, which is a play-based model to intentionally teach STEM in early childhood. So my focus was on teacher professional development through engaging with the model and the opportunities that it provides to increase girls' engagement with STEM.
Yeah, that was great. Could you say something? Did you do your PhD in what you would call a lab model? Because obviously you were part, as other students are, part of the conceptual play lab, but were you doing something in a collaborative sense? Were you working together? You know, was your PhD in some way part of a collaborative enterprise?
Yeah, that's right. So my PhD was part of the conceptual play lab at on the Peninsula campus, and it was really great because it is really collaborative. So it was this big programmatic study, and Ami can say more about that as well. But we were about 6 to 8 PhD students. We had 3 research fellows, and it was headed by Marilyn Flair, and we had Sue March, who's the project officer. So lots of us really working together, collecting data, and basically working towards this bigger programmatic study, but all looking at smaller slices of it as our focus.
So a component of a larger study.
That's right.
Yeah. Adi, is the same true for you, that yours was part of the larger study? And was there a benefit to doing your PhD that way?
Wow, I got really huge benefit from that, joining the play lab, but far from start of 2017, we haven't had the play lab, so we built kind of like the maybe pilot project for each context of the play world, and then we together with the team, it's like led by Professor Marilyn Flair, and then we have like broader research context, and then got the more team member here conducting the play lab in different aspects. So mine is related to the teacher in Indonesian context, and some others in Chinese context. And then actually together we built about the play world knowledge and understanding as a part of the play practices in early childhood education.
Yeah, that's great. And these kinds of lab models of PhDs are very unusual in education in many countries, including in Australia. They're more common in other parts of the world, including in Northern Europe, where that's, you know, the theory, the cultural historical theory comes from. But also it's something that we do want to have more of in the faculty. So we now have a new professor called Nicole Reinhardt, and Nicole Reinhardt will be building a lab around her work. So there'll be opportunities for other people to do PhDs in this way. And it is a really interesting way of doing it, very different. Doesn't always work for everybody. Some people quite like being a lone scholar, you know, plowing their own furrow, but the collaboration and being part of a larger project often can prepare people well for an academic position that follows. Maybe if I go back now, Mariko raised the opportunity zone, if you call it that, to put it positively, when you're at the point of looking what comes next for me. Now I'm coming in the final stages of the PhD where I've finished it. How do you choose what comes next? On what basis did you make the decision to, for example, Katrina and Luke go to postdoc positions at Deakin? I wonder if one or two of you might say that. How did you make a decision about what to do next? Did you have a priority that you wanted to say, I definitely would like to do that? Or did you really only have 1 or 2 things you could choose from? How did it work for you? How did you make the decision about where you've ended up? Maybe go back, maybe Katrina, could you say something about that?
Yes, sure. I am a postdoctoral fellow on a ARC discovery project, a large multi-institution discovery project, ARC discovery project. I find your words interesting, the word choose interesting, because I actually don't think that we have much of a choice. I think it's going to what's available, and I hate to be a downer, but I think the way the university system is working at the moment in Australia, I think new graduates need to be very open to all sorts of opportunities, not necessarily in academia, because I think that way over the next few years is very difficult. Yeah. I was I was lucky that I finished when I did, and that this project was looking for a postdoctoral research fellow. I mean, it's a dream come true for me, this my position. So working with amazing people on an amazing project. So yeah, I just think we have to be really, the theme is really good. We have to be really adaptable and open to all possibilities.
And you say what you've got is really good. Can you explain to people some of the benefits that would come from being a postdoc associated with something like a discovery project?
Yes, I am working with my dream team of researchers. So if you open my dissertation, you will find them all in my thesis. And the opportunity to work with such an esteemed group of people is really everything about this project. I am learning so much. Doing a postdoc is a wonderful opportunity to extend your research skills and publication skills, all of those sorts of things that come with working closely, like you said, like we were talking about in working with the Play Lab, in a lab. I think it's a great opportunity to really extend the skills that you pick up in your PhD.
Yeah, thank you. Luke, was it a choice for you?
I definitely think it was influenced by opportunity. I was very lucky in that I got the job before finishing the PhD, which I understand is I was very lucky to have that opportunity. But I think, being, I guess, the advice or being in that situation where we were talking about around thinking about those next steps, for me, it's been an interesting shift because I did my PhD in a faculty of education and now I'm in a faculty of business and law. So there has been, if you want to talk about adaptability, there's needed to be a bit of adaptability to move across, the different culture across those faculties. But in doing so, I think it's also a plus to think about those research skills that you have that are transferable across multiple disciplines, and thinking about how you might want to situate yourself as being able to move interdisciplinary and across faculties will increase those opportunities and then will increase those choices. But I think something that was really beneficial for me, and I would strongly recommend others to even start doing it now, if you're even in the early stages, is think about your networks and building up a community around you. And in terms of making those choices, I think it's great to do that collaboratively and see if you can find mentors to have in your corner who, if you're at that point where you're thinking, well, what's next for me? What should my next decisions be? I found that I was very lucky to have people that were much more senior than me to be able to call on, have a chat, ask for some advice, do a bit of brainstorming. And I found that to be incredibly beneficial, and I'm sure I'll keep drawing on that throughout the rest of my career.
That's great. I'll ask you this, Luke, if I may, and then come back to Katrina. What do you see as coming after your postdoc?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. I think I'm probably positioning myself more so as just a straight researcher. So I would potentially like to be applying for funding to lead my own project. Would be the goal, and I think it's, you learn a lot in those postdoc positions particularly if you work in a smaller team, around some of the behind the scenes of the collaborative work, the grant writing, those additional skills that I never really had access to as a PhD student.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to be building and drawing on those, and continuing as a researcher is essentially my goal.
So you see yourself following a research track rather than a teaching and a typical teaching and research academic track?
I think so. Initially, I would have said the other, that I would be, and I really do like teaching as well. But I think this has put me in a position to really hone in those research skills and get a glimpse of working with research-only academics. And I think that appeals to my, I guess, passions. And that's something to think about too, is your passions of what you want to be doing.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. I'll come on to other colleagues in a second, but Katrina, can I come back to you and ask the same question? What comes after the postdoc?
Well, like Luke, the working as postdoctoral research fellow with just doing research opens up the possibility of following a research trajectory, and I feel the same way as Luke on that. My dream would be to continue on a research trajectory. My concern is that given the climate in universities and the university sector, I'm not sure how realistic that is. But you know, my desire would be probably to pick up another research fellowship, and you know, I'm really keen on honing theoretical and research skills. That's what I love doing. Yeah. That's my passion, and that's what I would like to do. I do miss teaching, but and I do love teaching, so I'm open to that also. Okay,
I don't want to be a downer myself, but are you both aware that kind of, you know, that the choice of a research only track is even more precarious? You know, it is. I'll give you an example. I found out the other day, our faculty of pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences at Monash is kind of world leading faculty. It has 40 ongoing teaching and research staff, and it has 200 contingently funded researchers, including many level E's. And the current dean of pharmacy was previously a level E contingently funded academic. And he had to bring his income in every 5 years to get another fellowship.
Yeah, it's a precarious trajectory. I agree, and which is why I'm still leaving open, because, you know, I love, like Luke, you love teaching, love being with people. I'm a teacher. That's what I am.
Yeah, sorry to bring that up.
Yeah.
Haoran, you're a lecturer, and Adadwi, you're a lecturer as well. How did you end up in that position? Again, was it a choice, an opportunity, a combination of both? Haoran, maybe you go first.
Yes. I think for me, it was both choice and opportunities. I finished PhD in the beginning of the pandemic, and that time, from the news, there seemed to be like a roller coaster of opportunities for PhD graduates in education. So I started working as a lecturer just before finishing my PhD. And I think that's definitely helped me to moving to the next position. And also during PhD, I was involved in different research projects. So I think they also prepared me to be in a better, stronger position after finishing my PhD. And I would say, just as the keynote this morning in the conference mentioned, that some opportunities sometimes can be unexpected. So after I was in the faculty for being the lecturer, and then my faculty just got a grant to be able to conduct another 2 years project. So I was able to apply for it and become the research fellow. So my advice would be for the PhD students and fellows and friends, opportunities sometimes can be very unexpected. So I think sometimes it is important to be less stressed.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit about a typical day for you as a relatively new lecturer.
I would say it is very challenging sometimes because we move to online teaching, and also students. I work with undergrad students and some postgrad students. They were so looking forward to go back to campus for this semester. So for my typical day, we'll start by looking at emails and then started preparing for lectures. And also in the meantime, I'm doing multitasking. I'm also working on different research projects and addressing students' emails. I think with this time of teaching, we also look at looking after students' well-being as well, rather than just doing the traditional teaching and learning. So I think this is a new experience. So far, I quite enjoy it.
Good. What's the most challenging thing for you?
Personally, I think the most challenging would be the boundaries between work and the home.
Yes.
Because everyone's working at home, I think sometimes I just prolongs working time and it just can't stop. Yeah. So I think this is something quite challenging to set the boundaries.
Yeah, I see that when as I said to you earlier, I'm on Twitter. I don't do Twitter very much. I just look at it, I maybe look at it once a day. I don't necessarily tweet once a day. But what I notice amongst my colleagues in the faculty, especially my younger colleagues in the faculty, is they're tweeting about papers they're writing or reviewing at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I find that absolutely terrifying, because you do need to have a boundary around your work. You need a boundary around your work for the work to be really, really good, as well as for you to have a life. And I think that balance is so difficult, and people very easily get swept up in the momentum of a career. And they're thinking, I'm really enjoying this. I'm going to get paper published here. My name is on this grant. And then it kind of consumes you. And I think one of the things I keep on saying to colleagues is, it's fantastic you've got this energy, but use the energy to produce things of quality. Don't think about quantity, and make sure that you're nourishing yourself as well as a person, so that you've got the energy and you've got the intellect to do that academic work. So I think what you've said is so important, and it is a real challenge. And I have to say, sometimes universities don't help because sometimes the university apparatus and a kind of performance management stuff encourages people to become really hyperactive with it, really. But thank you for that as well. Adidwi, can you tell us about your daily job, the kind of daily experience of being a lecturer at your university?
Thank you, Viv. Yeah, back to Indonesia. I'm a senior lecturer now in Early Childhood Education Department in Faculty of Education Universitas Negeri Jakarta. It's one of the leading public university under the government. So basically, besides working with undergrads and postgrad and also graduate research student in the university after finishing my PhD, because I can move to the postgraduate level, I'm involved in some Indonesian Ministry of Education projects in developing early childhood education program. And I also work with the Early Childhood Education National Accreditation Board as an assessor. And besides that, not really in line with my job in government line, I built a kind of like center, we call it EduPlay, is an early childhood learning and research center to initiate movement in order to contribute more in early childhood education in Indonesia. So basically quite same with Haoran, and then doing the research while also teaching, preparing, also keeping my collaboration with others. So such as like last week, I think I collaborate with one of the PhD candidate here in Monash University in my early childhood education department. So seems like I will never leave Monash University. I will bring this as the legacy to contribute more in early childhood education in Indonesia.
Well, that's great to hear. And it's really interesting if you get a strong bond and you form a good relationship with your supervisor, with your university, you can continue a long relationship that is, can be really helpful actually to both sides, because what you will bring will give extra energy and a kind of feeling of newness and renewal to people that you've been working with for some time. But tell us too, what's the biggest challenge about your job? What makes it hard?
if I can say, it's quite different perspective here in Indonesia compared to what I learned in the Monash University, especially with Professor Marilyn Flynn with the culture historical things. So this is quite a new theory, not really new. We know about the theory, but not really use it as I use it when I joined in the Play Lab with Marilyn's team, and then also kind of like different research perspective while in this under this theory. So adjusting to the, like, maybe I can say the Indonesian context with the new things, bringing that with maybe people like want to know more about that, but it's I do really need to explain it clearly so people like will accept it as a kind of like new paradigm or something, because we have the old paradigm, and it is actually I also support this effort by keep publishing with the team member and then collaboration work with others. So it is like kind of like the evidence to bring this to Indonesia that I publish internationally. It's kind of like for them, it is important to know more about the new things, that is it applicable or relevant to Indonesian context, something like that. And also maybe I also try to kind of like develop maybe kind of like support system that we don't really have as a something new too. For example, the writing group, and also we have the reading group and the graduate research workshop. It's many new things that I want to implement back to Indonesia, but somehow it's not really like easy because this is bringing new things. It could be challenging for people to like wanting to know and then join me in this movement. So maybe that's took my energy a lot lately.
Okay, that was great. Now I'll tell you, when I started, I was a school teacher for 10 years before I did my PhD. And when I got my first academic job, it was as a lecturer, and it was as a lecturer at a teaching intensive university. So not a university like Monash is. And the thing that I found the hardest to deal with was the volume of teaching, the sheer volume of teaching. I had more teaching as a lecturer at a university than I did as a high school teacher. And if you're meant to be teaching academically at a university, to have that volume of teaching is almost impossible to sustain at the kind of level of quality that you want to. And my impression is that that was quite a long time ago, but those differences in the distribution of workload between some universities and others, they vary hugely. And the more research intensive universities tend not to expect you to teach as many units, but you may have more students because those universities tend to attract more students. But the thing that I found the hardest was trying to get a balance between a huge amount of teaching and research. And in the end, in my first job, I actually had to leave that job to go to a more research intensive university because I knew I wanted to do more research and to be more research active than my first academic position allowed me to be. So I would say, in terms of a piece of advice from me to PhD students looking for their opportunity, whether it's to further a career as a researcher in a postdoc position or to become a teaching and research academic, expectations of jobs differ hugely between different institutions, even in the same city, even in the same place. Tanya, could I ask you, what are you thinking at the moment then, now that you've reached that critical stage where you've finished essentially? What are you thinking about? What opportunities are presenting themselves to you?
Well, I was actually quite lucky because I had, just as I was finishing a position, became available at the Play Lab for a postdoc research fellow. So that was really good timing. So I did accept that position. So I'm working at the moment 3 days a week, so part-time with the Play Lab as a postdoc research fellow. And I'm also working for the other 2 days on another ARC project with the science research group. So I'm balancing my 5 days between 2 ARC projects. So at the moment, it's all research for me.
All research, and you're like a portfolio job then, haven't you, with one research fellowship and another research officer role. What do you think will be next for you after that?
That's a really good question. So I'm just taking everything in as everyone's talking today. But I think I really enjoy research and I love writing, but I do love teaching. So I was a teacher before as well. And so through my PhD, I have done a lot of teaching at Monash and I've enjoyed that. So I think I would like to go into something where I can balance research and teaching, but listening to everyone today, I think I'll have to pay close attention to the expectations.
Yeah, the expectations do vary hugely. Mariko, what are you thinking about now then, as you're dealing with those final amendments and things? What are you looking for? What would be ideal for you?
It's a big juggle, I think, in terms of trying to see what opportunities are available. I've been applying or looking at what's available since my, I guess, my last milestone, and I think that's been quite interesting to see what's out there. I accepted an internship role with one of a small academic journal, and I've been working with them for the last 3 or 4 months to see how the editing side of academic journals operate. That's been really interesting. My work life before I started studying was more corporate marketing and advertising and publishing. I don't come from a teaching background, so I am looking at more, I guess, bridging what I have done in my previous work experience to what skills that I've, I guess, was able to develop over my studies, and then transferring that into a space which marries both of those two areas. So I guess less from a research or a teaching or an academic role, I'm seeing what kind of other ways I can apply myself.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think someone mentioned earlier that sort of ideal or typical, stereotypical view that you finish a PhD, then you move into an academic job and you stay in the job for 35 years and then you retire. You know, it happens, but it doesn't always happen. And when I think about my own PhD students and what they're doing, the number of my PhD students who are still in academia as, you know, lecturers, senior lecturers, professors, that's about 40%, and 60% of them went into other things. So I've got a PhD student who now runs a non-profit organization that teaches prisoners inside an American prison as a higher education program. She coordinates a higher education program in a prison. I've got another PhD student that works for the European Commission in Brussels and works on education policy there. Bizarrely, the UK is no longer part of the European Union, so she's in a very unusual position. I've got a PhD student who is an education officer for a theatre company. That was actually the kind of work that she was in before. So people do PhDs and they use the PhD, they use the doctoral study process, they use the research process and the training they've received in many other different contexts, including kind of advocacy and other kinds of work. So I think it's always really important for people to stress that, including in education, because it's not a given that that's what you have to do next. You may wish to do something else. I've got other PhD students who were teachers. They may have been principals. I had about 4 or 5 high school principals that did, and a primary school deputy principal that did a PhD with me, and they're still principals. They're still principals because that's what they want to do. It was a personal intellectual project for them. Now, I've got a couple of questions here. one of which is from me, and I'm going to leave that one for a second. I'm going to ask the one that comes from Mohammed from Aceh in Indonesia, and it's going right the way back to the start of your journey as a PhD student. So if I could ask the panel, on behalf of this brand new PhD student, what's your advice for a brand new PhD student? Who would like to go first?
Stock up on snacks.
Stock up on any particular variety.
Chocolates.
There you go. What else for someone starting off with a PhD?
I would say start writing early, even when you don't think you've got anything much to write, and read everything and enjoy it. Just revel in it. It'll never happen. You'll never have the opportunity like this again.
Yeah. That's such a funny phrase. You'll never have this again. It'll never be like this again, because you can say that in several different ways.
I mean the joy of,
I know, high points and low points, but it's the high points and the low points that you remember, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a very special time. Luke, have you got any advice for someone just starting off?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Katrina in the sense of, I think there is a bit of a culture within, doctoral studies to sort of get caught in the negativity of being overworked. And, there are issues around well-being, definitely, which need to be taken care of. But looking back on it, it's great. You have a great opportunity to work independently on spearheading a large-scale research project. And in the beginning, that's daunting. And so that would be my next piece of advice. I remember right at the beginning being so sort of worried that I didn't have it all figured out and what was I doing and where am I going? And so I would embrace that component of just taking a breath and enjoying the uncertainty and remain curious in the beginning.
That's brilliant.
I think just to add on to what Luke was saying as well, just taking it one step at a time, I think that makes it a lot less daunting than looking at it as a really big project.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. The conversations are just so interactive. I just want to keep continuing, but I'm conscious of time. So can I please request to start winding up the Q&A so then we can move on to the closing remarks by Professor Ellis, please.
Okay, thank you very much for I do want to come back. Is there anyone who wants to add anything though to that? And I will answer your question, Danielle, as well. But anyone else who hasn't spoken, advice to the new PhD student?
Maybe if I can say, learn as much as you can, not only about research, but about many things around you, the organization skill, management skill, communication skill, everything. It's related to your PhD journey, because it can be beneficial for you after you finish your PhD for all the skills you have.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Haoran, anything from you? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I would suggest reach out to help when you have challenges and difficulties. You all probably have amazing supervisors and you have amazing friends. So if you feel you are stuck somewhere, and talk to them, and they will be very helpful. And also remember to have a good laugh as always.
Yeah, exactly. And Mariko, you're the closest. Any advice from someone starting off?
I think the first thing that came to mind was doing the 120 hours of the professional development. That I think if you can focus on that, I got a lot out of doing those early on. So by the time I got to my final milestone, I could just focus on the writing and the editing. But what I really enjoyed was actually the collaboration that those workshops provided, meeting other students and that was actually, I know it's difficult now while we're in COVID lockdown, but if you can do those face-to-face workshops, they're wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really, really helpful. The other thing I would add, just to a new PhD student, I agree with everything that everybody said, including that advice. You've got an opportunity to read everything that you can and enjoy that. It is also to take exercise, because I remembered when I started, my physical activity levels dropped through the floor. And actually I found deliberately planning things like to take bicycle rides and things like that was so important, because even when the world was pre-pandemic, it was very easy just to stare at your screen all day. Okay, thank you very much, panel. That was absolutely wonderful, really excellent. And I just want to finish now by answering one question, which was for me before I go into my final remarks, which was from Daniel Hradsky, which was agreeing that academics need a better work-life balance. But Daniel says that she's curious, what does this Faculty of Education, the Monash Faculty of Education, do to encourage / motivate change beyond just telling academics we need to focus on quality and not quantity? Currently, quantity and unhealthy habits are often rewarded by the system. So that plays into what I was saying a bit earlier, which is I do see people working intensively, to put it positively, or hyper kind of intensively, to put it more negatively, an intensification of people's engagement in their job, which to some respects you want to comment on positively, and you want to encourage people being interested beyond it being, you know, just what's the phrase, phoning it in. Yeah, you want people to be really passionate about it, but a point comes at which it becomes really unhealthy, and sometimes work cultures can not only reinforce that, it can kind of encourage it, really. One of the things that we're doing in the faculty, which if you look at it from one angle can sound very much like improving the way academics are managed, but from the other angle looks like you're getting into more developmental conversations with academics, is to improve the quality of what is called in universities supervision. There are different names for that in different countries and contexts. So it's something like performance management in some contexts. It's a bit like mentoring. It's a bit like appraisal. These are words that are used in different academic contexts in different countries for that relationship between someone who is more experienced and kind of more expert and may well have management responsibility, and someone who is less experienced and is kind of getting into the system. And what we're doing at the moment in the Faculty of Education here at Monash is to really try to make that work, because very often those kinds of systems become box ticking exercises simply at the level of they've been completed. You've had a conversation, whether it was meaningful or not, at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. And what we're doing is we're working with the supervisors, working with the more senior people to give them new ways of having conversations with the people they're supervising. So they are focused on quality, but they're also focused on thinking about their workload and the limits to their workload. And these are the kinds of conversations that people are not having, they're telling us, in the past. They haven't had these kinds of conversations to say, what are you going to focus on? What are you enjoying and what do you want to develop in terms of your teaching? Where is your research going? What support do you need with your research? Are you doing too much in one area of that? I mean, one of the areas that I think people sometimes feel they have to do a lot of is dissemination activity, or writing op-eds or writing opinion pieces. And I see people churning those out all of the time. And one of the things we're doing is to encourage people to focus on ensuring that they put a boundary around their work, and that's the role of the supervisor to ensure that, but also to look at the different aspects of their work, their teaching, their research and their service, and to encourage people to think about focus and quality. Quantity in the system in itself is actually not rewarded, because the other thing that research intensive universities tend to do is they tend to put criteria over things to say that they have to be in certain journals, or they have to have had so many kind of citations, or whatever the markers are. And they're not always that accurate as proxies of quality, but to focus on the quality is a really important thing. So that's something very practical that we're doing in the faculty, which is to encourage the kind of conversations that tend not to happen. And the conversations, they can't happen all with me, they can't happen all with the dean, they absolutely have to happen between the individual academic and the person they're working with who is more senior and has some responsibility for them. So I'm going to stop answering questions there now and close down that chat box. And I've got some closing remarks, which I think will connect with what I said yesterday in the Spring School Conference. And what I was saying yesterday in my opening remarks to the Spring School was that we have all lived through and are living through a once in at least 100-year event. You know, we're still going through a pandemic, and it's different to 2020. It's not the same. It's, for many people, it's still bad. And 2022, when more of us will be on campus and will be interacting, will also be difficult, you know, because one of the realities of the situation, as people are finding in other parts of the world, is that even when you are vaccinated, people will still get sick. We will still have cases, people will have to take time off, work will be disrupted, teaching will be disrupted. So next year it'll carry on, it'll look different, and we have to try as best we can and plan for that. But that's a kind of planning of coping with the situation. And what I was saying yesterday is, having been through this 1 in 100-year event, a global pandemic, having endured this phenomenon of lockdown, when we have been intentionally isolated, when we've had restrictions imposed on us, when we've had to think about the world and our relationship with it differently, we should use that as a great opportunity. We should use that as a great opportunity not to return to the way things had been planned before. Now, you will hear a lot of people wanting to get back to the ways things were before very quickly, and sort of forget that this ever happened, and forget that, you know, we were suddenly exposed to the knowledge that the way we relate to the environment, the way we relate to the world, damages it. That the way that we move around the world contributes to the problems that we will experience as part of a climate crisis. Now, all of that we've been suddenly focused on, because when we've been restricted and confined, we haven't made as much impact. We've also become even more aware of how unequally resources and privilege are distributed within our societies. And even at a time when we have been to an extent governed by science, we still live in a society in which access to healthcare and vaccination is horrendously unequal, even at a time when we're governed by science. We've also learned what the power of research can be when people at the top of their expertise work together without ego, with funding, thinking about the impact of their research, not just how many times a paper is cited. Then research and scientific activity, including social scientific activity, can actually make a massive difference to the world, as we have seen with vaccinations. And the person that I was mentioning yesterday, who I think has written best about this, is the French social scientist Bruno Latour. And you will know him, you might know him from actor network theory or from science and technology studies. And the books that he's just published in English is called After Lockdown, A Metamorphosis. And what I was suggesting yesterday, and it is something that we're going to do as a faculty, but it's something that I recommend everybody to do. And if you Google After Lockdown, A Metamorphosis, you will find a kind of online social experiment that you could take part in if you're interested, is to think about, after this once in 100 years experience, how do we wish to change? How do we wish to transform the nature of the research we do and how we do it? Because if we just return to the old ways, if we just go back to the ways things have been in the past, or even worse, in our desire to kind of normalize things, we accelerate all of those processes that lead to further damage to our world, to exacerbate inequality, then we will have wasted everything that we've been through, everything that we've endured, all the suffering that has gone on in the world. So after lockdown, what kind of metamorphosis should there be for the research that we do in education, in psychology and counselling? And it's that thinking through that and resisting the push to go back to the way things were that I think is the most important thing we can do over the next few years, and just resist that sort of call to normalize things. And as I said yesterday, I'm not against flying, and I'm not against us meeting people, including our families, but we have to think through how we do those things differently. How are we international without putting thousands of students of Monash University on a plane every year? How are we connected in a way that doesn't mean that we have to be emitting carbon all the way around the world? The priorities for our own research and after lockdown and the way we envisage the transformation of that have to take into account everything that we've been through, everything that we've lost, everything that we've endured for the last 18 months to 2 years. So at that point, I will thank you, and I'll hand back, I think, to our MC.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to our amazing feature panel, Dr. Katrina MacDonald, Dr. Luke Macaulay, Dr. Haoran Zheng, Mariko Francis, Dr. Aditi Utami, and Dr. Tanya for your time and the wonderful conversations and sharing those experiences of yours. And thank you so much, Professor Viv Ellis, for chairing the panel and the closing speech. It really means a lot. I'm sure the audience, just like me, have many takeaways from the experiences you've shared with us today. Thank you. Thank you to also Amar for monitoring the chat. With this, we have reached at the end of the fantastic MERC Conference 2021. I, on behalf of the MERC 2021 team, wish to thank you all for attending the conference. You have been such a fantastic audience. Today's conference has been such a success and would not have been possible without the guidance of a wonderful MERC mentor, Dr. Kate DeBruyne, and the Graduate Research Office, the abstract reviewers, event management team, communication teams, conference volunteers, and presenters. We really acknowledge the contribution you have got today. Thank you all for presenting and participating in the MERC 2021 conference. Thank you again for flooding our Twitter account with the bingo game. Our Twitter account is looking so colorful. Please keep your eyes on the Twitter account as we shall be announcing our winners tomorrow. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us. Thank you.